The town of Dry Creek sat baked under the midday sun, where dust devils danced like restless ghosts and every porch carried the size of wooden boards. The saloon's piano clinked lazily, and flies hummed over half-empty mugs of beer. No one paid much attention when the old woman came stumbling through the dirt road, her faded bonnet tilted and her hands trembling around a worn shawl. Her name was Martha Halley, widow, farmer's wife once, and known for talking to herself since her husband died 3 winters ago. Most townsfolk figured she'd lost her wits somewhere between the drought and the fever that took her only son. But today her eyes weren't lost. They burned with fear. "Please, somebody help!" she shouted, stumbling toward the sheriff's office. "They want to hurt my daughter. My Clara's sick, she's just a girl." A few men looked up from their drinks. Others just shrugged. It wasn't the first wild story to come out of the prairie. But one man, sitting quiet at the edge of the saloon, set down his whiskey glass and rose. He was big, the kind of big that made the doorframe groan when he passed through. 6'6" if an inch, shoulders wide as a wagon, hat brim low over eyes the color of a storm. Folks called him Boone Calder, the giant rancher, owner of the Red Mesa Spread, a place so vast you could ride for half a day and still be on his land. He didn't say much, Boone. But when he did, people listened. He stepped off the saloon porch and met the old woman halfway down the street. She nearly collapsed when she saw him, clutching his arm like it was the last branch over a raging river. "Mrs. Halley," Boone said softly, steadying her. "Tell me what's happened." They came last night," she stammered. "Riders. 3 of 'em. Said my Clara owed them money, claimed she cheated at cards. She's sick, Boone. Fevered for days. She ain't left her bed. I told them, but they said they'd come back tonight. Said they'd take what's owed one way or another." Boone's jaw tightened. "Who were they?" "Redden boys. Out from Cross Ridge. You know 'em, mean as snakes." Boone knew them, all right. Brothers who rode with their father's outlaw gang before he got himself hanged. They'd been stirring up trouble again, shaking down ranchers, and the sheriff, an old coward with one good eye, wasn't doing much about it. Boone helped the old woman sit on the saloon steps. "Your daughter," he said. "She's at your place out by Widow's Creek?" Martha nodded, tears streaking her dusted face. Boone turned toward the livery. "I'll go." The sheriff poked his head out of his office across the street, already shaking it. "Now hold up, Boone. Don't you go meddlin'. Ain't your fight. If the Reddens come around, I'll handle it." Boone looked at him once, just once, and the sheriff's words trailed off like smoke. By the time Boone saddled his horse, the whole town was watching. The sun dipped westward, painting the sky in bruised orange. Someone muttered, "He's gonna get himself killed, that one." Another spat and said, "Nah. Boone Calder don't die easy." He rode out through the sagebrush and dust, the sound of hooves like thunder rolling across the plains. The Halley place was barely a shack, boards missing, roof sagging, a windmill groaning beside the well. Chickens scratched at dry earth. When Boone arrived, the old woman's hands were shaking so bad she could barely unbolt the door. "She's inside," Martha whispered. Boone stepped through the dim doorway. The air smelled of herbs and sickness. On a narrow bed by the window lay a young woman, maybe 23, just like her mother said. She was pale, hair matted with sweat, her breath shallow. But even sick, her face held a kind of soft, stubborn beauty. Her eyes fluttered open. Who are you?" "Name's Boone Calder, ma'am. Your mother asked for help." She tried to sit up but winced. "They said they'd come back." Boone nodded once. "They won't touch you. Not while I'm here." He stepped back onto the porch, where the setting sun burned low behind the hills. He leaned against a post, lit a cigarette, and watched the trail leading from Cross Ridge. The night came slow, with a purple hush and the cry of coyotes in the distance. The old woman lit a lantern inside. Boone stood outside, statue still, his rifle leaning beside him. Around midnight, the sound came, hooves, faint at first, then louder. 3 riders, just like Martha said. Boone could see them now, Redden boys, laughing, spurs jangling. "Looks like Mama brought a new friend," one sneered when they reached the gate. Boone didn't move. "You boys best ride on home." The leader, Jeb Redden, grinned. "That so? And who's gonna make us?" "You." Boone tossed his cigarette aside. "If I have to." The Reddens laughed. "Ain't your business, giant. Girl owes us. We're here to collect." "Girl's sick," Boone said calmly. "You ain't collecting nothin' but trouble." Jeb's hand drifted toward his revolver. "You got big talk for one man." Boone's voice stayed low, but it had the weight of thunder. "Ain't about talk. It's about right and wrong." Then it happened. Jeb went for his gun. Boone's rifle barked once. The shot cracked through the still air. Jeb's hat flew clean off his head, a neat bullet hole tearing through the brim, inches above his skull. The Redden boys froze. Boone's tone was like cold iron. "Next one goes lower." For a long second, nobody moved. Then Jeb spat, cursed, and jerked his horse around. "You'll regret this, Calder," he shouted. "Ain't over." Boone didn't answer. He just stood there, tall and silent, until their silhouettes vanished into the darkness. Inside, the old woman sobbed quietly with relief. Her daughter stared at Boone from the bed, trembling. He walked to the door, tipped his hat. "They won't be back tonight. Get some rest." "Why'd you help us?" she whispered. Boone paused, eyes shadowed by the brim. "Because decent folks don't stand by while others suffer." Then he stepped back into the night, the moonlight silvering the broad outline of the giant rancher. But somewhere beyond those hills, the Redden boys were already planning revenge. And the real storm hadn't even begun. Morning came sharp and blue, the prairie wind stirring the wheatgrass into golden waves. Boone Calder had been up since dawn, checking fence lines on his horse, Hammer. The Redden boys wouldn't forget last night's warning, but they sure as hell wouldn't forgive it, either. Boone knew their kind, pride like a splinter festering under the skin. They'd come back, angrier, and likely not alone. At noon, he stopped by the Halley farm again. The old woman was sitting outside, grinding herbs with trembling hands. When she saw Boone, she managed a weak smile. "Clara's better this morning," she said. "You scared that fever clean out of her, I think." Boone chuckled softly, the sound low and warm like distant thunder. "Don't give me that credit, ma'am. Fever's her fight. But I'll stick around a while, make sure you're safe." Inside, Clara was propped up on her pillow, color back in her cheeks. The sunlight through the torn curtain made her hair look almost gold. She looked at Boone with shy gratitude. "You really stayed out there all night?" Boone nodded. "Didn't sleep much." She smiled faintly. "You could have been killed. I've had worse odds." For the first time, she laughed, a small, tired sound that seemed to light the room. Boone tipped his hat. "Eat something. You'll need strength." As he stepped back outside, the old woman called after him. "Mr. Calder, Boone. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't owe me," Boone said, looking toward the horizon. "But you can do one thing. Keep that door locked tonight." That afternoon, Boone rode into town to talk to the sheriff. The man was dozing behind his desk, hat over his face. Boone kicked the door open with his boot, making him jump. "Boone, Lord Almighty, what's the meaning of—" "The Redden boys came to Widow's Creek last night," Boone cut in. "Threatened the Halley women. Drew a gun." The sheriff shifted nervously. "You didn't shoot him dead, did you?" "No." "Should've." "Boone, I can't have bloodshed." "Then do your damn job," Boone snapped. "Post deputies. Bring them in." The sheriff sighed, rubbing his temple. "You think I got deputies to spare? The county pays me in dust and promises. I can't pick a fight with the Reddens." Boone leaned forward, his shadow swallowing the sheriff's desk. "You won't have to. I already did." By sundown, the news had spread through Dry Creek like wildfire. The giant rancher had stood down the Redden gang. Folks who'd once whispered about Boone in fear now spoke his name with a kind of awe. But out at Cross Ridge, Jeb Redden's pride was bleeding. He sat in the saloon there, nursing whiskey and fury, his brothers beside him. "He shot the hat clean off your head," laughed a drunk ranch hand nearby. Jeb slammed his glass down. "Shut your damn mouth." "We can't let it stand," said his younger brother, Eli. "You'll look like a fool." Jeb's jaw tightened. "We ride tonight. Bring the others. 10 men. We'll burn that shack and take the girl. And Calder, he'll beg before we're done." The prairie night turned black and heavy. Coyotes yipped in the distance. Boone sat by a small campfire outside the Halley farm, rolling a cigarette, his rifle beside him. Inside, the mother and daughter slept at last. But Boone's instincts itched. He could feel trouble in the air, the same way animals sensed a storm before it hit. Around midnight, he heard them. Hooves. Many. He doused the fire with his boot. "Damn." The Redden gang rode up fast, lanterns swinging, voices echoing through the dark. Jeb's voice rose above them all. "Boone Calder, you think you can humiliate me and live?" Boone stepped forward into the lantern light. His face was calm, eyes steady. "Go home, Jeb. You don't want what's coming." Jeb laughed. "Oh, I want it, all right." He motioned, and 2 men rode toward the house. Boone lifted his rifle and fired twice. 2 clean shots, horses reared, men tumbled. Chaos exploded. Gunfire flashed. Boone dropped behind the water trough, firing deliberate, deadly shots, each one hitting its mark. The night filled with the thunder of rifles and the screams of startled horses. Inside, Clara woke with a gasp. Her mother clutched her hand, praying under her breath. "Stay down," Boone shouted from outside. But a lantern shattered against the porch wall, fire licking up the wood. The Reddens were setting the place ablaze. Boone swore under his breath, grabbed his revolver, and charged forward like a bull. He shot Jeb's horse out from under him, then swung the butt of his rifle, catching another outlaw square in the jaw. A third came at him with a knife. Boone caught the man's wrist, twisted, and sent him sprawling. The blaze grew, crackling, painting the whole scene hellish red. "Calder!" Jeb screamed, crawling to his feet, face smeared with dust and blood. "I'll kill you." Boone leveled his revolver. "You've had your say." A single shot rang out. Jeb Redden fell backward into the firelight, eyes wide, chest still. The others fled into the dark, leaving their fallen where they lay. By dawn, the Halley house was half burned but still standing. Boone had pulled the women outside, wrapped them in blankets. Smoke rose in lazy ribbons into the pale sky. Clara, weak but alive, looked up at Boone. "You saved us again." Boone shook his head. "Just did what needed doin'." The old woman wept quietly, holding her daughter close. The sheriff arrived hours later, jaw slack when he saw the scene. 5 dead men, 1 wounded, the Redden leader among them. "Boone," the sheriff muttered, "you've started something we can't stop." Boone looked at him, weary but unflinching. "No, Sheriff. I ended it." The sheriff nodded slowly. "You'll have to answer for it, you know." Boone glanced at the women, then back at him. "Then I'll answer." That evening, the town gathered again. Folks whispered as Boone rode in, his hat low, coat singed from fire. The sheriff stood before the saloon. "I've spoken with the judge," he announced. Boone Calder acted in defense of life and property. "No charges will be filed." The crowd murmured. Then someone started to clap. Then another. Soon, the whole town was cheering. Boone tipped his hat, quiet as ever. But when the cheering died down, he turned to leave. "Mr. Calder." Clara called from her mother's wagon. She was pale still, wrapped in a shawl, but smiling. "Where will you go now?" Boone looked back at her with a faint grin. "Got fences to mend. Always do." Then he mounted Hammer and rode off into the burning sunset, the wind carrying the scent of smoke and new beginnings. The town of Dry Creek would talk about that night for decades. the night a giant rancher faced down a gang for a sick young woman and her old mother. And how, in the old Wild West, one man's quiet courage shocked them all. The days after the Redden gang's downfall were heavy with both relief and whispers. Dry Creek had never seen such violence, never with justice so plainly delivered. Folks spoke of Boone Calder with awe, of course, but also unease. He was a man too large, too silent, too capable, and men like him didn't belong in ordinary towns. At the Halley farm, the pace was slower. Clara's fever had broken, but weakness still clung to her like a shadow. Martha fussed over her, boiling tea from herbs, counting every breath, checking every pulse. Boone spent hours nearby, mostly quiet, sitting on the porch with hammer tied to a post, scanning the horizon as if the past night's danger might return. Clara had recovered enough to sit upright and look out the window at the sunlit prairie. She asked softly, "Do you always ride into danger for strangers, Mr. Calder?" Boone shrugged, tipping his hat back slightly. "Not always strangers. Sometimes folks just need someone who won't stand by. Today that was you too." She smiled faintly, warmth in her eyes. "I'm glad you were here." Martha patted her daughter's hand, whispering, "Blessed be the day Boone Calder rode into our lives." Word of Boone's actions reached other ranchers in the county. Some rode out to thank him. Others, cowed by his reputation, stayed back. Among the visitors was old Sheriff Mason, hat in hand, face lined with worry. "Boone," he said one afternoon, voice low, "you've stirred more than a little dust. People will try to make trouble for you now. The law, they'll talk, and some will envy what you've done." Boone leaned on his rifle, eyes scanning the horizon. "I did what had to be done. Folks can talk. Won't change what's right." Sheriff Mason sighed. "Right, maybe. But sometimes right comes with a price." Boone simply nodded. He didn't fear the price. He knew the prairie, its dangers, and the truth that sometimes standing up was the only way to sleep at night. As weeks passed, Clara regained her strength. She even started helping her mother around the farm, carrying water, feeding chickens, and cleaning the modest barn. Boone visited often, not as a savior, but as a quiet presence, checking fences, making sure none of last night's chaos returned. One afternoon, as Boone repaired a broken fence post, Clara came out with a small basket. "Boone," she said, voice trembling slightly with shyness, I made some bread. Thought you might like some." He accepted it with a nod, a rare smile touching his face. "Thank you, Miss Clara. You're too kind." She glanced at the horizon where he kept his horse tied. "You don't stay in one place long, do you?" Boone shook his head. "Ranch work calls. Folks like me, we move where we're needed." She studied him, curiosity and gratitude mixing in her gaze. "You could stay here, you know, if you wanted." Boone looked down at her small, hopeful face and said nothing. He didn't need to. The prairie wind whispered around them, carrying unspoken truths. He was a protector, not a settler. And yet, the thought lingered. Then, one morning, smoke rose in the distance again. But this time, it wasn't a threat. It was a signal. A group of settlers had lost their barn to fire, animals trapped inside. Boone mounted hammer without hesitation and rode out, leaving Clara and Martha waving from the porch. Hours later, he returned with the lost cattle rounded up and the barns remained salvaged as best as could be managed. He hadn't been asked to help, but he did. That was Boone Calder's way. Protection without question, justice without boast. Clara watched him ride back into the sunset that evening, her heart heavy and light at the same time. "He's like a giant shadow," she said to her mother. "Always watching, always there, but never staying." Martha nodded, hands folded in prayer. "God sent us an angel with the body of a man." Winter came early that year. Snow blanketed Dry Creek, the wind turning sharp and cruel. The Halley house, repaired and fortified after the Reddens' attack, looked small and fragile in the vast white landscape. Clara spent long hours by the fire, reading aloud from a book Boone had brought, a rare moment where he let himself sit and listen, the stoic giant softened by the warmth of family and hearth. "Do you ever get lonely out there?" she asked one evening, her voice almost a whisper. Boone paused, staring into the fire, reflection flickering across his stern face. Sometimes. But the prairie, it keeps you company. And folks like you, he added quietly, make it worth riding back. Martha smiled through her worry. You've done more than anyone could ask, Boone called her. You've saved my daughter, kept her safe, and shown her what courage looks like. Clara looked up at him, eyes shining. I don't know how to ever thank you. Boone shrugged, as if gratitude were unnecessary. You don't owe me. Just stay safe, keep strong. That's all the thanks I need. The story of that night, and Boone's quiet heroism, became legend in Dry Creek and beyond. Folks told tales of the giant rancher who stood against the Redden gang, a man who measured more than muscle. He measured courage, justice, and honor. Children whispered about him, and mothers used his name to teach bravery, do like Boone Calder would. Clara grew stronger, her health restored fully by spring. She and her mother often watched the horizon, hoping to catch a glimpse of Boone as he rode past, always distant, always quiet, always protecting someone somewhere. And Boone. He never stayed long in one place. His work called him to fences, cattle drives, and ranches where trouble brewed. But he carried with him the memory of the Halleys, of a young woman, sick and afraid, and an old mother, desperate and pleading. They reminded him why he did what he did. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Clara saw him ride by once more. Hammer's hooves thundered on the frozen earth, the giant silhouette casting a long shadow across the snow. She waved. Boone nodded faintly, tipping his hat. Then he disappeared over the ridge. Clara held her mother's hand tightly. Do you think he ever comes back? Martha shook her head slowly, a smile in her eyes. Some giants don't stay, but they leave something better than themselves behind. Courage, hope, and the knowledge that good men still exist. And somewhere on the vast plains, Boone Calder rode on, silent, towering, unstoppable, a guardian in a land that needed him more than it could ever say. The legend of the giant rancher cowboy of Dry Creek endured, a tale of fearlessness, heart, and the power of standing up when the world seemed to stand against you. And for Clara and her mother, it was more than legend. It was a gift, a reminder that even in the harshest lands, protection and kindness could come in the most unexpected form. A giant, quiet cowboy with a rifle and a heart as wide as the prairie.